Hello, I'm here with Caitlin to talk about kids' online safety and other things. But first, we've got the IRS using AI, or so they.
Right. Well, going after people evading taxes is a difficult process. It requires a lot of thoughtful people doing a lot of thinking and researching on, how they might be avoiding taxes. And that means that especially if you're wealthy, you can make it so hard to track that the IRS just won't do it. And this is a problem. So one of the newer applications of AI appears to be in catching tax frauds, which will be very good. I think this is a perfect application of machine learning, in my opinion, even though it'll probably catch a few people that weren't doing anything wrong. But that'll be for the courts to go over. So let me pull up the article here. All right, this is from Gizmodo by Nikki Main. And yes, the AI is going to use AI, and it's primarily going to target the very wealthy people and look for ways they are cheating taxes. And actually, they have an entire press release here. The press release says the IRS is announcing sweeping efforts to restore fairness to tax system with Inflation Reduction Act spending, new compliance efforts focused on increasing scrutiny on high income partnerships, corporations, and promoters abusing tax rules on the books. And if we search for AI, oh, that's gonna be hard to find. Anyway, but yeah, that's the newest big trend in machine learning is going after tax evaders, which I approve of. I think this is good.
Well, it sounds like a good idea if it works, but I'm just thinking of them trying to run AI on COBOL on a 1970s mainframe. I think, and also the fact that like 95% of all government IT projects fail. I'm skeptical that they can actually bring the IRS from their current condition of obsolescence up to actually successfully using AI in any time soon.
So the government has been all in on using GovCloud, which is the Amazon
Ah,
AWS services for the cloud. So I don't think they're going to be running this on COBOL
well,
servers.
that's a start anyway. Um, so I mean, I do agree that AI is actually a good technology for finding tax cheats because it can pick the outliers out of a group.
Right.
Yeah. Although you shan't trust anything it says, so you'd have to verify it, but it could pick the suspicious people out of a pile of people paying taxes.
Exactly. It can find patterns that are very difficult to find for humans to look for.
Yeah.
And if there are outliers, it will pick it up, let people know, and hopefully that'll work.
Yeah, we'll see. It's not a bad idea. They're facing huge pressure, of course, because the Republicans are funded by the billionaires, and the main goal is to avoid the billionaires paying taxes. So they want to stop the IRS from auditing high-income people. But we'll see. They have at least a couple more years to go uh, before they'll probably get severely hampered by the government.
Okay.
Anyway,
Don't wealthy people also want to have like a strong military and funded roads and
no, they
oh
just want to move to an island where they can have, slaves and have all their own version of that, and the rest of us have nothing. That's what most of them want.
oh well okay. To each their own, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, so New York Times has another bit article by Kashmir Hill, who is, a notorious, a very noted um, privacy researcher, did lots of things, and she has a lot of information about facial recognition technology, which is pretty amazing. I mean, facial recognition technology is probably the only major technical accomplishment that was worth a lot that both Facebook and Meta developed 6 years ago and did not release because they both decided it was too dangerous, and there were various stories coming out about this. I remember the first Google Glass launch video where they said, you can wear this. And in the launch video, they had a mock-up demonstration of how great this is. You go to a party, you meet somebody, up comes their face, and immediately, like RoboCop, it says his name, his income, his criminal record, everything just scrolls by. So you learn all that instantly about everybody as soon as you see their face. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. That could be useful. And of course, other people said, that would totally invade your privacy. You'd meet a woman that tells you like who her boyfriend is, where she lives, how to stalk her, where she works, what kind of car she drives, all. And so they didn't release it because of those privacy concerns. But now the cat's out of the bag. Those tools totally exist. And the problem is the big established rich companies had a business model which this would disrupt. So they didn't release it. But now a bunch of AI startups are releasing essentially this technology, and it's going all over the place, used by cops and just everybody. So they say this is arguably the end of privacy, where anybody that can see your face anywhere can just figure out everything about you. And I think it's already true for humans that use image search and a bit of study. I know there's a game my sister plays, a lot of people play, where someone will just take a picture out a hotel room window somewhere in the world and give you no other information, and you have to find out where they are. And this turns out that you can totally do this. They have a contest, and within like 12 hours, people can totally find anything from that kind of information. So that means obviously a picture of a person, they could probably very quickly figure out everything about you. So anyway, it's a very interesting review of how we got where we are. And I think it's quite true that privacy is going to erode greatly on the internet. I've expected this since the 80s. I thought people might just get over feeling like they needed so much privacy, but that has not happened. People still have a need for privacy, but it's harder and harder to get. I know one thing I've noticed is all the women that I've known in online rooms, about half of them vanish after a while, never come back. They just can't tolerate any kind of social networking because they get so much harassment and stalking and everything. And that doesn't seem to be getting better anytime soon. Anyway, let's go back to the big one, the Kids Online Safety Act.
Right. So whenever the government promotes a "what about the children" act, you should always be very skeptical. That's usually a tactic by people who have other agendas but don't want it to be well known. So that's the thing about American politics, is like we have this right wing that doesn't like Black people, that doesn't like gay people, that doesn't like Latin American people, but they'll never go out and say it. So it's always wrapped in euphemisms and
not so much these days. Now they'll just proudly march with Nazi flags and
right.
And say it. I think that since Trump, they no longer need to hide it.
It's no longer as hidden as it once was, but there's still a need. If you're going to go into Congress and pass something, you're going to have to call it not the "we don't like gays" bill. It's the "protect children's innocence" bill, and so that's what's happening right now, of course. And I have the best source for this news, by the way. There's a magazine called Teen Vogue, and Teen Vogue is a great magazine. It is really good. No, I'm not even joking, and Sam agrees.
I know. I started quoting it years ago. I saw like cybersecurity articles in Teen Vogue, and I said, "Teen Vogue, what is this?" And I looked, they were good articles.
What's
going on? I expected it to be just about makeup and dating, but it's amazingly good stuff in there.
Yeah, it's intelligent. It's a really good magazine. You'd never guess Teen Vogue. But anyway, Teen Vogue has an article. I saw it was by Teen Vogue, and immediately I was like, okay, we got to cover this on the podcast. So let me share my browser if I can figure out how computers work. There we go. Okay. So yeah, Teen Vogue has this article. It's called "The Kids Online Safety Act Would Harm LGBTQ plus Youth, Restrict Access to Information and Community." So this was by Sarah Phillips, July 27th, 2023. And essentially what's happening is that Congress wants to pass this bill called the Kids Online Safety Act. And like I said, anytime you hear "protect the kids" bill or whatever, you should that's super fishy. That's a right-wing fascist tactic going back generations, protect the kids. In fact, you can even tie it back to like blood libel, which, if people are aware, so that was an old technique used to go after Jewish people back in the Middle Ages, where they would say, the Jewish people are going after your children. So this is an old tactic to protect the children. I mean, and the truth of the matter is that children are highly resilient and actually don't need as much protection as most parents, or at least new parents, realize. As parents have more children, they realize they don't need to get the best diapers and coddle their children, and they're largely fine with less supervision. But but there's always a desire to protect our children, and we want to make sure our children do well. And so if you have a nefarious agenda and most people aren't going to like it, you wrap it up in protecting the children. So what the act would essentially do is create rules about content that might affect children negatively and block it. And so like on the surface, this doesn't sound too bad. Like, for example, like on social media, they might want to block children's access to content about like eating disorders or stuff that might cause like anxiety, stuff like that. Just not age appropriate, content, as we would call it. And I mean, that alone isn't anything too bad, except that, as this article points out, you have to consider who is going to decide what content is going to be harmful or not harmful, and that is going to be left up to the state attorney generals. So the state attorney general in New York will probably be like, yeah, let's not have children be shown pictures of suicide and stuff like that on social media. Fine. But then the Ron DeSantis person in Florida might be, yeah, all the gay stuff on online platforms. No, that's harmful to children. That has to go. And that's exactly what's going on. This is why it has such support, especially among Republicans, but even some Democrats. A bunch of Democrats are supporting this as well. But that's the idea, is that this will be used to essentially, stop children getting in contact with, other children who are LGBTQ plus. And that's an important resource, especially when you're young and you're scared of your peers, right? And how they'll react. Going online for resources is very important for young queer kids. And there are a bunch of bigots that would love to take it away. And this is what this act would effectively do. And I don't know how the websites, like the social media websites, would say, like I said, because it's going to be up to the state attorneys. If Florida says LGBTQ plus content is bad for kids, therefore, you can't have that, showed to kids. How do they? But California or Oregon says no, that's fine. Do the social media companies just take it down for the entire country? Because it would be really hard to figure out, like, is this person in Florida, or not? And this is not good.
Yeah, well, I mean, this I think is part of the balkanization of the internet. Now they find rather than enforce the privacy laws of Europe everywhere, they're just going to show different websites to Europe, different websites to California. And if this continues, they'll have to show different websites to each state to conform with whatever their laws are.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to hurt children, queer, vulnerable children in states that are already, hostile towards them, regardless. So,
yeah.
And we've seen these book burnings recently as well in the United States, which is extremely disturbing. We should not be having book burnings in the United States, but here we are, book bannings and stuff. So,
yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, I've always thought the simple answer is the old-fashioned free speech absolutist, where the government just can't restrict what goes on social networks at all. But it seems like you need some content moderation, but we can't agree on what that content moderation should be. It's a really thorny problem.
Well, I mean, the idea behind most content moderation is that most websites are private. Therefore, they can decide what sort of moderation they want on their sites, as long as it's, as long as the content itself is legal. So, you don't show pictures of people murdering each other and stuff like that, or committing crimes. But, as long as it's legal content, you can show it. And the government does not, censor this information.
Well, this brings up another thing I've been hearing recently on podcasts, is that since Elon Musk destroyed Twitter, most people have lost their online social network. A lot of people have, and they've realized, most people have just moved to private chats, like Signal and Telegram and stuff, where they just don't post everything publicly for the whole world to see anymore. And that does seem to be the obvious workaround for all this. And I've heard a lot of people say the younger generation does that too. They go to private chats with small groups of people.
And that's how it was in the early internet with like IRC, I
Yeah,
believe it was, and like use group.
yeah,
Um, and you would go on to these small little chat rooms of communities with your friends and small people that, you know, it wasn't this worldwide, everyone gets to see what you're talking about type thing.
yeah. And then perhaps in your small group, you could agree on what you're talking about and what's acceptable.
Right.
Yeah,
But all this stuff about kids online safety, I mean, it's really sickening to see all these anti anti-gay, you know, politicians and anti-black politicians and anti Mexican politicians and all this stuff. I mean, it's and people banning books. I mean, it's just really concerning for the state of the union.
it is. It is. I mean, I was talking to my class about it last night. Marjorie Taylor Greene again says the red state should secede. We just seem to be pushing towards a repeat of the Civil War, which is not going to do anybody any good. But forces are pushing us in that direction. It's not clear what's going to stop it.
I mean, the thing is that if they do another civil war, the South will just lose again. There's
Yes,
no way
I know it would be better if they could lose with our peaceful transmission of power and the election process, but they don't seem inclined to accept that anymore. And I mean, the point is, they've chosen, rather than adapting with the times, they've chosen to cling to an agenda for a dwindling group of people that are no longer majority. And the original plan of politics is then they would shift their position, and that's what George Bush tried to do. He said, "Well, we got to reach out to the other ethnicities and start accepting them and start being more tolerant, so we can, retain a majority." But Trump moved all the way back. Let's go back to white supremacy, when there just aren't enough white people to make that work anymore.
there's not. And also, it seems like the modern Republicans have forgotten that we're all in this together, that we're all on Team America, Democrat, Republican, Independent. We're all on Team America.
Hmm.
And, you know, I've seen a bunch of agendas put forth by conservative think tanks about just taking over and just pushing everything through and just ignoring the other side and just winning and winning and winning. And that's not the point of politics. And that's not the point of having a democracy. It's not to win, win, win and push through and just get the other side just knocked out. No, you work with the other side. You're on the same team. you
Well,
know,
that's what you're describing as democracy, but
yes,
the Republicans don't want democracy. They want authoritarianism, and they're
right.
often quite clear about it. They think that a small group of powerful people should just force everybody to live their way, even if they don't like it.
Right. And that comes back to the authoritarian
Yeah.
issues that we talked about earlier being very disturbing about the, you know, book bannings and the Kids Online Safety Act and all the stuff that's going on right now about, you know, outright open supremacy. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not good.
Yeah. Yeah. It like I say, I mean, never really resolved the Civil War. It's like a fire that you didn't really put out, it's smoldering and it keeps flaring up over and over. And now it's flaring up again. Anyway, there's an article I found on quantummagazine.com. Quantum Magazine. I don't even know if I find the author. Not very clear. Anyway, this is extremely interesting. I was unaware of this research. I did a lot of quantum mechanics in my physics days and in my thesis and such. And the classic quantum entanglement problem is the Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen effect, where you have one particle that decays into two particles, and the two particles then travel some distance apart. And when you measure one, you now know something about the other because the total spin is zero. And this has always been seen as, Einstein said, this proves quantum mechanics is garbage because of this creepy action at a distance, this signal that goes faster than the speed of light. But when I read this, I finally understood it a different way, which is really simple. Suppose you run a car rental agency and you rent a car to somebody and they have a collision and then they drive the car back. The two cars that collided might not be far apart. You can look at the car that comes back and see how damaged it is. And from that, you can deduce how damaged the other car is, even though it's a distance away. It's not like a signal or any information moved faster than light. It's that there was some information you didn't have. And when you learn it, you can deduce some information about the other particle. And what these guys did is analyze the amount of information being carried by entangled particles and then consider a network of many particles, like a cloud of gas or neurons in the brain that are constantly colliding and exchanging and therefore becoming entangled. And they said, how much would measuring one particle in such a system caused the whole thing to cease being uncertain. And they proved that it doesn't stop it doesn't cause the collapse of the wave function for the whole network at all to measure some of the particles, even quite a lot of them. So their proposal, which is wild and outrageous, is that even large macroscopic objects have a high degree of quantum entanglement going on. And it'll be interesting to see what happens here, but it's a brand new idea and opening a new understanding of quantum entanglement and how measurement affects it. So it has no remote practical application yet, but it's an exciting new field of physics. Most all the physics I did, you would sort of neglect quantum activities at a large scale. And there was always a small number of lunatics suggesting that quantum activities mattered at a macroscopic scale. And it may be coming back again. So anyway.
So Sam, I was under the impression that the idea that quantum or spooky action at a distance was definitely a thing, because there was the old hypothesis of like the glove, right? The left or right glove, right? Like if you put two gloves in boxes, a pair of gloves in boxes,
right,
and you move the boxes apart, you open up one box and you see it has the left glove. Now you know that the other box has the right glove.
That's right.
And that has been discussed many times before in quantum physics and has been demonstrated to not be the case.
Well, that's not the case. Oh, you mean the fact that it's not mediated by hidden variables? That's true.
Right. Right, exactly. So it's not mediated by hidden variables, which is what you're describing, right? Like
that's true. The example has it mediated by hidden variables,
right?
But in quantum mechanics, it's not mediated by hidden variables, but it does involve. But you cannot transmit any information through quantum entanglement,
right?
Because you measure one, you don't know what you're going to get. You just once you have measured it, you know what the other one is. So it's you can't send a signal or anything. That's why there's always been a huge argument. What is this spooky action at a distance? It doesn't seem to actually accomplish anything. So it doesn't seem like anything was actually sent from one location to the other. It's just that in principle, I can predict what the other person is going to measure, but there's no way I can tell them that. So they're going to measure it and have the same experience as if I hadn't measured it. Well, that's why people argue about this a lot. In what sense is this entanglement a real thing?
Right. So for a lot of people, when they talk about quantum mechanics, the first experiment that comes to mind is, of course, the double slit experiment.
Yeah.
Right. And for me, that's actually not the quintessential quantum experiment. For me, it's the polarization lenses, where you have one lens polarized vertical and one polarized horizontal, and you hold them in front of each other, and no light gets through because the horizontal one blocks, vertical light, and then the vertical one blocks horizontal light, so nothing gets through. If you have another polarization filter at 45 degrees between the two, suddenly light starts getting through again. And that to me is very interesting, and it's almost as though it's almost as though like the particles only remember their last interaction.
Well, that one is easy to understand just from the wave property of light. But I mean, that is the double slit one has essentially the same thing, where you send one particle through two slits and it interferes with itself. So it really passed through both slits at the same time.
Right. But once again, with the double slit experiment, it doesn't seem to know what slit it goes through because it didn't interact with the slits as it went through it.
Well, things move as a wave, but they arrive as a particle.
Right. They arrive as a particle, but they were when it hits the screen, it's almost like the universe has to figure out where the particle came from based on its last known interaction. And
that part I don't understand. I mean, the classic explanation is that its position is uncertain until it's measured at the end.
Right.
So it's just moving as a diffuse wave up until that point.
Right. Unless you measure it.
Right. But putting it through a filter and putting it through a slit does not constitute measurement. That just affects the waveform. So there's no measurement at all except the end there.
Right. But at the end.
Right.
And so there's very different ways. There's different ways to interpret quantum effects.
Yes.
And so what you're talking about is the standard wave theory, where you have a wave of uncertainty and the particle doesn't know where it is until it hits the end.
Right.
And another way to think about it is that it gets to the end, it doesn't know where it came from, and the universe sort of figures out probabilities of where it came from, and then, you know,
I don't understand that at all. I mean, where it came from means nothing. You measure it at the end, it's there.
yeah,
That doesn't
yeah,
tell you anything about where it came from.
yeah, and it doesn't know which slit it came through either.
No,
So
nor
it
does it care. That's right.
so it just
That's not
becomes
part of the experiment.
it becomes a probability,
That's right. Whatever you don't measure is not determined.
right? Exactly. So anyway, but yeah, what were we talking about? We're talking about
Entanglement. Entanglement is the next
entanglement.
step
Yes,
up. You
entanglement.
must have
Yes,
two particles, and you try to
yes.
understand what is the connection between one and the other of these
Oh,
particles.
right. And so one of the things that also applies to entanglement is you can also think of it as the two only sort of remembering their last interaction together.
Well, that's what this new development suggests is not true. You can have a cloud of gas and a bunch of it remains entangled even though they bounced off several others. That's a brand new idea.
Mm.
But
That is brand new. Yes.
and there's 4 different research groups that have studied this and proven different proper parts of it. And this sort of moves quantum mechanics from like a single or one or two particles up to like condensed matter, where you'll have a whole bunch of particles and figure out how they interact with each other through entanglement. So it's sort of like a new type of matter, a new type of gas. You know, all kinds of interesting properties might be found. Anyway, let's go back to you. You've got people not transferring to 4-year schools.
Well, actually, they are, and unfortunately, these articles make it sound like it's worse than it is. But California, the administrators of California community colleges really want their students to transfer to 4-year universities, and this is on Cal Matters by Adam Eshelman and Erica Yee. And they have some numbers. So the study looked at people, at incoming freshmen to community college, asking them who wants to transfer to a 4-year university, and then looking at who actually goes there. And what they found is that in like 2015, only like 7%, a little less than 7% were actually transferring. In 2021, it was up to like 10%, which is still very low. And to me, it seems like college administrators should look at these numbers and reevaluate the mission of the community college.
Yeah.
Now, I know how community college leaders work. They're not going to do that. They're going to be like, no, our mission is to get students into 4-year colleges. We need to make this change somehow, even though that's not what people are using this for. Because college administrators are, how do I put this politely? Dumber than an ass. So
well, they're only trying to keep the college funded, so they're trying to meet the current legislative goals. And the legislative goals are from decades ago, when college was not so expensive and when it was more important and more valuable.
Right, exactly. So, like I said, dumb as asses. Anyway, so but it is slightly going up. But these are the metrics that the community college is working on. And what they found is that for the people that do transfer, it is mostly wealthy urban students that transfer to the 4-year student, and they're young too. So if you're young, wealthy, and from an urban environment, you're very likely to transfer to a 4-year university.
Well, it seems incredibly simple. It's very expensive, so most students can't afford to do it.
Right. So the answer, of course, is to turn, if community colleges want students to go to a 4-year university, we need to convert community colleges into 4-year free, or largely inexpensive education for them that they can get at a huge discount, because it's just too expensive to transfer to a traditional 4-year institution.
Well, I think Jerry Brown promised this in the 60s, that there'd be a free 4-year education for every student in the UC system, but they never were able to fund it or make that happen.
Right.
And so and then of course you have another deep question. Do you really want everybody getting a college degree? And the job market strongly suggests there's no reason for that. Most jobs do not require a 4-year degree. And there was an article that came out a week or so ago. I don't remember if I discussed it on this podcast, that said if you look at the financial consequences of getting a 4-year degree, it is no longer true that it makes you more rich. What's true is you will get a higher level of pay, but all that extra pay is eaten up by having to pay back your student loans. So they
Exactly.
priced 4-year colleges to where it's really not a generally good idea for everybody to go do it.
Right. And at least for me, that's getting into the job market and getting, a basic education, which I do consider, a bachelor's degree sort of basic education, is a worthwhile goal and something we should have. But there's also continuing education as well, which Sam, you are of course doing a lot of with your cybersecurity work at the community college, which,
Yeah.
and focusing entirely on getting these students into 4-year universities when only 10% who even plan on going even go. I mean, it's not going to work out well for community colleges if they continue going down a path that doesn't seem to be what people are using community colleges for.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I'm in the business, so I've been thinking about this for decades.
Yeah.
In Britain, they have trade schools, and we don't have trade schools here. That's what community colleges are functioning as. The adult education is to get you like an industry certification so you can get a better job, which is not at all, a 17-year-old getting the first 2 years of what will be their 4-year degree, which is what this is thinking about.
Right.
Community colleges are doing a lot of things that are not actually in their original mission statement or in their funding model. And that's why we have crazy things like our department, where the teachers are trying to teach cutting edge technical skills, and yet there is no budget to train them and no encouragement to recruit the right people or keep the right people to do that. So it's sort of unsustainable.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we really should have trade schools. And I think we're going there with like Google online education and technical schools and coding boot camps. I think we're developing in sort of the private sector America's trade schools, which is what we need for people who don't care about a college degree. They just want to learn a technical skill and get a better job.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, and the last one here was pretty amazing to me. This is something, there used to be this company called HB Gary Federal around 2011. They came out and they said, we can correlate Twitter comments with Facebook comments and everything else, and we can find out who's in a hacking team or conspiring with others, so we can de-anonymize the anonymous hackers that are hacking everybody. And it turned out to be totally fake, and he fingered the wrong people and got destroyed and went down in flames. But the same idea is still out there, and this is the latest one. This company called Voyager Lab is selling police something that analyzes online traffic to find out who the criminals are, and it does it with by making fake online profiles to get access to people's semi-private online Facebook chats and such. And so it's just the latest incarnation of the same thing. There's this constant belief that you could analyze the online things and figure out who's bad. And it reminds me a lot of these predictive policing things. There've been a bunch of them have come out, and they usually tend to be highly pushed, highly advertised, sell to police departments, and then prove not to do much good. And this seems to be going through that process again. But anyway, it's there seems to be an endless market for selling quick fixes to police departments where you can isolate the criminals. And of course, they probably have some success, but they also invade the privacy of a whole lot of people. And in particular, this time they're getting mad about the fact that they automatically generate fake profiles to get in people. Now, this used to be how detectives did everything. Private detectives would use pretexting. They would call you and pretend to be your lost friend or somebody giving you a prize or something. That's how they get people to tell you things. You lie to them to make them trust you and tell you things, and this is just automating that process. And whether that's legal, whether you need a warrant for it and all that are questions that are out there, open for discussion. Anyway, I think that's it for this stuff for technical, but I want to hear about your astronomy pictures.
Oh, so I will show one of them today. Let me turn off my webcam so you can see the background. This is the Wizard Nebula. And let me pull up the NGC number because it is...
It's amazing how much that looks like something. It doesn't look like a real astronomy. It looks like a science fiction art drawn with an airbrush.
It is not. And so these are actually very close to real colors. I say very close because I am using some filters. So this is NGC 7380. And let me pull up in Stellarium so we can get a view of that. Stellarium. Online. There we go. There we go. Okay. Okay, so let me pull up the web browser here, share browser. Okay. So the Wizard Nebula is right here, sort of right in the near the Milky Way center here. Or not center, I mean the center's over here, but you know, it's off near Cygnus. To the yeah. And if you go all the way in, and this is a false color image, but you can still see it here. This is upside down compared to what was in my image. But this is where it is. It's this small patch. We're looking at a field of view right now of about 0.8 degrees. So it gives you an idea about how zoomed in this is.
About the size of the full moon.
No, oh, much less than the full moon. The full moon, let me see if I can't find the moon.
0.8 degrees should be about right.
Field of view. If we
Almost
zoom
half
in,
a degree across.
field of so yeah, maybe about the 0.7, yeah.
Yeah.
0.5, I think is really what the picture is. Anyway, around there, less than a degree of width. So it's, you know, relatively zoomed in, right in the middle of the Milky Way. And I chose this target because it is in the Milky Way. In fact, most really interesting things are in the Milky Way. This area right here. So the galaxy itself is very thin. And so when you look out here, like south or above the Milky Way up here, so if you look west, you know, it's above. So here's the Big Dipper. Or is that this little? No, that's that's definitely the Big Dipper. No, that oh yeah, that is the Big Dipper. Okay, good. And then so by the way, so here's the Big Dipper, right? And if you ever want to find Polaris, you see these two at the end of the Dipper. Follow them straight up. Boom, there's Polaris. Anyway, so I'm digressing. So the Milky Way itself is filled with a bunch of stars and filled with a lot of interesting objects. Usually out here there's very little. And there's also more stars, which is really good when you are having these larger focal length telescopes, so larger zoom, and you need to find stars to track. Going in the Milky Way is very important. So the way that I got this image is I took my camera out and my telescope out, and I have it set up now that it can largely run without any intervention all night. So this is about 6 hours worth of images from a borderline, meaning highly light polluted area.
That's right. Suddenly looking so much better. Okay.
Right. And it also uses a dual narrowband filter. So it captures the hydrogen emissions, which is the deep red, as well as oxygen, which is sort of this bluish color. And then I take it, once it's done, and I have all these images, and I took 5-minute exposures over the course of like 6 hours. Once it's done, I take all the images, smash them together, I stack them together, and I get one highly, detailed image. And then I have two channels. I have the hydrogen and the oxygen that I'm able to separate. And so I throw the hydrogen back into red, because the hydrogen is a very deep red color, and it really does look very red in space if you could see it with your naked eyes. And then the oxygen is sort of this bluish color, so I found a good color of teal, smashed it back together, and I tried to make it as accurate of colors as I could. But this is where this comes from. So and then that is how you get an image of the Wizard Nebula. in Sunnyvale, California, and under borderline nine skies with the moon out and next to an airport and city lights. I mean, you can do it. It takes a lot of math. And so the specific math that I'm using, and I'll show the picture again, is that for every time you quadruple the number of pictures taken, or you quadruple the amount of time taking pictures, you double the signal to noise ratio.
Right.
So if you so there's decreasing returns. So after like 6 hours, if I want to like double the signal to noise ratio, I'd have to do 6 times 4, which I have to do 32 hours.
24. Yeah.
Oh yeah, 24, sorry. 24 hours.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't
Which
do
would
that.
be hard because like the sun would come out and get in the way and stuff.
Right. And then I would have to take it out again, do the same images over and over, you know, and people do that. If you real astronomers, like remember Hubble's deep field? That was actually done in a very similar technique.
Yeah.
Where they pointed Hubble towards an empty point of the sky, and the Hubble is of course orbiting the Earth, so it would have to stop every once in a while, you know, and point back to it and take more pictures and more pictures. And they just did this for days and days and days until they got this, you know, patch of sky which they thought was empty actually is filled with, you know, distant galaxies and stuff. So
yeah. Yeah. Well, good.
yeah,
I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad to see these pretty pictures. My favorite thing about astronomy is what got me into it. Before I was even in college, I'd walk down the hall and this guy was teaching astronomy class, and I just was there to see the pretty pictures. The pictures are great.
yeah. I mean, the thing about astronomy is that if you do it in real life, like you look through an eyepiece,
Yeah.
especially under borderline skies, you see, like if you're looking at nebulas, you might be lucky to see a smudge of
Yeah.
the biggest, most brightest nebulas, and you couldn't really make anything out. But this is where modern technology comes in, and modern smartphones, which have these cameras, which we can adapt to astronomy. So that's where this comes from. So this is very, very new, new techniques that are coming out, but it's really revolutionizing the way that you can do astronomy. And I think some other companies have picked up on this, because now you can buy like $500 like mini telescopes you put on your desk and uses similar techniques, and you can get, you know, you can see nebulas and stuff like that. You just leave it outside overnight. I mean, this is changing astronomy, and it makes it possible for people to do stuff like 20 years ago that would have been impossible. So like this image, I mean, I would have either had to go to the Keck Space Telescope or gone to like Hubble to get something like this. But now I can just do it myself. And of course, this is all very new. So I'm writing a bunch of the scripts and stuff myself to make sure that this doesn't crash. In fact, I had a unfortunate accident on Sunday night, Monday morning, where my telescope did not survive a meridian flip, so it just ended up doing nothing all night. So you know, there's still bugs to be worked out, but within a decade, I think you'll start seeing telescopes designed from the ground up with these technologies built in, that you can just buy from like Walmart and start doing stuff. This is just technology you'll see like 10 years from now. I'm just
Sounds
doing now.
great.
Yep.
All right. Well, that's it for this one. And we'll have another one on Friday.